Data binding, as I mentioned earlier, also known as binding, is an important concept that allows us to link data between C# code and the view in Blazor. This means that a value from a field or property in C# code can be displayed in a specific place on the view. So far, in previous modules, we have used one-way binding, which means we defined a field in C# and displayed its value on the view. Importantly, this value could not be changed on the view, only in the C# code. If the value in C# was changed, the view was synchronized. Let's look at an example. Here we have a header, private, string, header, which equals form. Now on the view, we can display the value of this field in the header. This is something we have done before, so it should be familiar to you. Now we can add a button that, when clicked, changes this header. Description, change header. The event onClick equals change header. Let's add some bootstrap classes to make it look nice. Okay, let's add such a method in C#, and we'll change our header to a different value. New header, and now we'll run the application. And here appears our header, which is linked to a field in the C# code. If I click this change header button, it changes the field value in the C# code, and it also synchronizes on the view, and this is one-way binding. Additionally, it's also event binding because the onClick event is bound to the change header method. Besides that, we also have two-way binding, which means we can update the field value both ways from the C# code and the view. So, let's look at another example. Let's add another field here, private string name. Next, we'll add an input at the top. This is an HTML input. We'll bind it to our private field name that we just created, and below we'll display the current value of this field like this. We'll add some spacing here. Okay, and now at this point we have defined two-way binding because we can change this value both in the C# code and on the view. I will now launch the application and see how it looks. So here we have a default empty value because we haven't entered anything into the field, but we can also change this value in the view. Notice that if I enter some data here and then this input loses focus, the field is updated and we display the value of this name field here. As you can see, we can update it from both sides, both from the C# code and from the view side. We can also change it so that the value of this name field is updated immediately when a new character is entered, meaning that as soon as there is a change here, the field is updated immediately, not just after we finish typing and the input loses focus. So step by step. This input bind equals name is actually a shortcut for this notation. Bind hyphen value equals name and bind value event equals onChange. So if the onChange event is triggered, we update the value of the name field. The notation we have here is the longer version and this notation is the shorter version. And now if we want the field value to be updated immediately after any character change, we just need to change the event name to onInput. If I run it now, you can see that the value is set immediately when I change some data here. So, as I type, the value is updated immediately. On the forms, as I mentioned, we will use dedicated components, and here it looks a bit different, meaning we will use bind, value, as we have in these two examples. Importantly, note that in this case, the word value is capitalized, and it must be so. If it were lowercase, it wouldn't work. So, you need to pay attention that it must be capitalized here. In our training and later when you create more applications, you will want to use this notation. That's all for the introduction to one-way and two-way binding. I will now remove the code I created in this lesson as it is not needed here and only creates clutter. Let's tidy up the code a bit. Great. Now, I invite you to the next lesson where I will show you how to input numbers on the form.